today we drive within Mumbai city in the Mahindra Thar Roxx as well as the Kia Seltos to find out which is a better city ride and tell you why you might want to buy the Tata Nexon CNG. Hello and welcome to the very last episode of Overdrive for the year 2024. I am Soini Dutt. And what a year it's been for the Indian automobile industry with so many launches, and of course one of the biggest launches of the season and of course the most awaited one this year has been the Mahindra Thar Roxx. So we decided it only made sense to give the Thar Roxx a city workout alongside a very unusual rival.
You already know by now that the Mahindra Thar Roxx can go really quite far off-road. But what's it like in our urban jungles where, let's be honest, it's going to be spending nearly all of its time?
Or is something like the Kia Seltos with its compact size and crossover-like demeanor popular for good reason?
The two SUVs here couldn't be more different mechanically. The Seltos is based on a front-driven monocoque platform that brings it quite close to any other car you might be driving. The Thar Roxx, on the other hand, is an SUV in the most traditional sense. It's of a body and frame construction and is rear-driven. It's the same with their drivetrains. The Thar uses a big displacement 2.2-litre turbo diesel, which in this two-wheel drive version runs a softer tune, making 152 psi and 330 Nm, paired with a 6-speed torque converter automatic. The Seltos here is fitted with a higher strung 1.5-litre turbo petrol that makes 160 psi and 253 Nm, paired with a 7-speed DCT. Now, looking at the sheer size of the Thar, you might be thinking that it's going to be pretty tough to drive in traffic, but that's really not the case. This car is far easier in this kind of rough stuff than you might think. Now, that's really down to the great visibility that you have now. You're sitting pretty much higher than most other cars on the road, and that really does let you place this car very well in traffic. Now, once you get used to it, the width doesn't become that much of an issue. With the way the visibility is, you have this flat windscreen. It's not the widest or the biggest windscreen, but it's just right. And the way the flat bonnet flows out around you, it's really quite easy to place this car in traffic. Now with the Seltos, it's much more of a known quantity. It's much more compact. It's much easier to manage in that sense because of its size. So that's one big plus point for it. But despite it being a fairly straightforward crossover in this context, I have to say that the visibility out is really great. You can see the edges of the bonnet clearly. The windscreen is really quite large and wider than the Thar. And it's really not difficult to place that in traffic either, but for my pick, I would pick the Thar. But you will be surprised to know that despite these varying approaches, these two are not that different in their real-world numbers. The Seltos is quicker, doing the 0 to 100 kmph run in 9.6 seconds, while the Thar is not too far behind at 10.9 seconds. This gap is much closer when you look at the rolling acceleration times. Much of this is down to the greater weight of the Thar Roxx and the Seltos' more efficient construction. So it's no surprise that the Seltos, even with the turbo petrol, is more efficient, both in the city and on the highway, managing a combined 13.1 kmpl versus the Thar Roxx 11.7 kmpl. One big advantage that it has is that it gives you that diesel torque straight from idle. So off the line, this is the peppier car, this is the torquier car. And you're sometimes even caught off guard with the sharp response that you get just off the line. In that sense, the Seltos performs more like a traditional turbo petrol. Now, while this 1.5-litre motor is really good of its kind, you do realize that you need to rev it out a bit more in this company to get it into the power band and really start pushing you forward. You get drive modes in both, but it's only the Seltos that gives you terrain modes. These have been skipped for the Thar Roxx's two-wheel drive versions. Further, the drive modes seem more effective in the Kia. They do change engine and steering response more noticeably and can be of use in various situations. You also get a sport gearbox mode that does come into use when you want to get a move on. Now the Thar Roxx of course has that solid, indestructible feel from behind the wheel, but I must say that the Seltos also does a very good job. It again feels taut and secure in its own way. But the big difference in the way these two cars are constructed really shows up in their ride. Just something that you will notice every day when you're driving them in the city. Now with the Seltos, it being a monocoque front-driven architecture car, you notice that it's much tauter, much more secure, just normally ambling along in a smooth paved road like we are right now. Whereas with the Thar Roxx, you do notice a slight constant movements that are a trait of ladder frame cars such as this one. That and now the gap or the difference between that and a monocoque car like this one is really quite marginal. But then with the Seltos, especially in this version, riding on slightly larger rim tires, you do notice that the Thar handles are smaller in perfection, the smaller ruts and creases much better. You do feel them a bit more in the Seltos, but really the way the Thar barrels through these is genuinely commendable. Now of course the Seltos can't do that, you wouldn't want to risk it in the Seltos. But where the Seltos does do well is that it doesn't give you that bouncy sensation that the Thar still does to an extent. The Seltos, it stays level, it stays more composed more of the time, which again some people might like, or some people might just prefer that strong, tough feeling that the Thar Roxx gives. But spend a few hours behind the wheel and you realize that a monocoque like the Seltos is still easier to live with. It doesn't have those small body movements or the juddering over small bumps that add up to tire you out a bit more. Yes, it has a firm edge to it, but this does get better as the road surface improves. The Roxx has also come a long way in the handling department. It's surprising how it doesn't wallow and roll as much as you expect something this big and tall to. It turns progressively and body movements are predictable. More importantly, it feels light and manageable, which will appeal to some who might want the image but not the stress that comes with owning something this functional. But the Seltos is lighter and sits lower to the ground, not to mention that it is one of the better handling SUVs in its segment. Body movements are better managed, it turns with more enthusiasm and precision.
Well, we're just getting started on this comparisons test. Stay with us for more. You're watching Overdrive. Welcome back. Here with us on Overdrive. Now we're back to figuring out whether the Kia Seltos is a very good match for the Mahindra Thar Roxx within city limits, and our findings might just astound you.
Now both cars feel quite premium on the inside. The plastics and the materials used around the cabins are almost as similar, but if we had to give that slight edge, it would be to the Seltos. The materials used are just that bit premium, and even stuff like the stitching on the dash of the Seltos feels more precise compared to the Thar's a little bit wonky here and there. Even the climate control buttons, while the Thar's feels more utilitarian, the Kia's has a touch of luxury towards it. Now in terms of storage space on the inside, both cars are quite evenly matched, except for the fact that on the Seltos you get bigger door pockets, on the Thars it's not quite big. Moving on to the screens, the Kia's again feels a little more nicer, the touch feels better, it's more slick. Even the way the menus are laid out, it's easier to get used to this, while on the Thar it would take you some time to get used to, but you would eventually get there. I would even go a step forward to say that the instrumentation on the Kia, the graphics, are slightly more detailed than the Thar Roxx. Now you get 10.25-inch touchscreens in both cars. Here, the Mahindra has an edge with its wireless phone pairings and a useful widget-based home screen. The Kia unit has more logical submenus and, like I said earlier, is generally more responsive to use. The Harman Kardon system in the Mahindra isn't quite at the same level as those found in luxury brands, but it does make for a more immersive sound experience than the Bose system in the Seltos. The air conditioning is more effective in the Mahindra, but we found that the vents lacked enough adjustment. The door pockets also don't hold 1-liter bottles, which is down to its typical ladder frame construction. And we also wish that the entire center armrest slid forward. The Seltos doesn't suffer from these issues, but both generally give you a good amount of storage in the center tunnel, especially the two-wheel drive Thar Roxx. A good touch is the separate wireless charging tray in both vehicles.
There's little to choose between the two in terms of features. The Seltos door has an edge with highlights like the head-up display, dual-zone AC, ambient lighting and rear sunshades, while the Roxx gives you a powered front seat too. Thar Roxx has a clear edge over the Seltos in safety. You get a 5-star GNCAP rating, but more importantly, it performed nearly identical to the smaller, lighter Seltos in our braking performance test. You get 6 airbags, 360-degree cameras, TPMS and level 2 ADAS in both. Here the Seltos claws back some ground with its better tuned ADAS system and much clearer cameras. Now wherever you drive these cars, you or your family members will be spending quite a lot of time in the back seat. Now in that regard, the Thar Roxx isn't that easy to get in or out of, and while it is a bit of a step up, you get these nice chunky door handles, but that's not the problem. The problem is that this opening isn't quite as large as the Seltos. The Seltos, it feels quite a bit more car-like. The wheel well doesn't protrude into the space all that much. It's much easier to just step into the Seltos than it is into the Thar. Having said that, once you are inside, both these cars are reasonably comfortable. We'll start with what one does better and what the other doesn't. Now in terms of absolute legroom, the Kia is slightly better, but as you can see, the Thar is by no means cramped or small. Even if you are a taller person, you will be comfortable here. And then you can see the good deal of headroom that I have on offer. On many occasions, you find with ladder frame cars that the door is a bit too close to you, but no, here it feels really quite nice, very natural. So in that regard, it's good. Now the Kia feels much more car-like. You do have slightly less headroom considering it too has a sunroof. And yeah, you do find that it might be a bit cramped for you. But then coming to the seat itself, now the Thar has a flatter seat, so 3 abreast is slightly more comfortable here. The contouring of the Kia seats means that when you're sitting 2 up, then it's probably more comfortable. But if you travel 5 people regularly, then the Thar is a better option. I'll just show you. This part is completely flat. The floor is also completely flat, unlike the Kia. So that also helps in this regard. And there's another neat trick up the Thar sleeve that really does enhance the comfort here. You can fully recline it.
As you can see, the Kia Seltos' boot, it's quite big. The lip is not that high either, so it's easy to store stuff in. It's about 433 liters. As you can see, we have stored about 4 bags inside, and there's still space to maybe put another bag or 2 more. But if you come over to the Thar Roxx boot, first things first, this opens sideways and it could be a little difficult in tight spaces, and only once you open that can you access this rear windshield. And when you get on the inside, it's about 644 liters, so it's more than the Kia Seltos. Only thing is, to actually use that 644 liters, you might have to store bags slightly vertical.
This top-spec Kia Seltos X-Line costs Rs 24.24 lakh on-road, which doesn't seem great value when you see the sheer mass of the car that you get with the Thar Roxx, which costs Rs 25.08 lakh in this diesel two-wheel drive form. But everything considered, this is about as tough a choice as it gets. Yes, it's a no-brainer if you're purely after the image and character that a Thar Roxx gives. It also happens to be nearly as refined and easy to live with as a crossover, which means you really can't go wrong with it. Yes, the Seltos could have had a more convincing safety image, but looking at it objectively, the slightly sharper drivetrain, better everyday driving manners and the smarter cabin just edges it for the Kia.
Well, it's time now to head into our final commercial break here on the show, but coming up on the other side, we tell you why you should buy the Tata Nexon CNG.